So I'd like to talk a little bit about what are standards, because this word is being bandied about in the discussion about national occupational standards without really defining what that is. And standards in terms of education have a very specific meaning. So Yoga Alliance professionals have issued a statement which is very critical of the British School of Yoga and suggests that their own standards far surpass anything that could be created by the national occupational standards. In fact, what they're talking about in terms of standards are simply that they require a tutor on a Yoga Alliance certified course to have 8 years experience, and they require the course content that is being taught to be provided to students. Well, just for clarity, that is not a standard. So everyone would assume if they were on a course that the tutor was competent to deliver that course. On our own British School of Yoga training, we would require at least that number of years experience, but we would also put our tutors through a 2 to 3 year training course to enable them to become course tutors. So that is not a standard. That is just a very high requirement, a quality threshold for the tutors delivering the course. The second aspect that they describe as a standard is that the tutor must provide detailed information on the course content to the students. Well, again, we would not see that as a standard. No one in education would see that as a standard. They would see that as basic provision of information. I mean, you wouldn't sign up to a course without knowing what was being delivered on that course. So it's a very odd claim to say that that is a standard. In fact, what we do, what others in education do, would not only provide that information, a course syllabus, but crucially also all the assessment criteria. So the way in which a student, the amount of work, the type of work, the assignments that have to be provided by the student in order to pass the course. We would also insist on appeals and complaints policies in place, so that if you don't agree with how the tutor has marked your work, you can appeal against that to an independent person. If you have a problem with how the course is being run, you feel the tutor's not doing their job very well, there's a complaints process in place which leads to an independent third party who would oversee that complaint. These are all sort of basic policies that every educational establishment ought to have in place, and again, it's not standards. So what are standards? Just hopefully so this discussion about national occupational standards can be a little bit firmer and more defined. A standard works like this. It does start with the syllabus. So you are going to teach something, if you are a course tutor, to your students, and you define what is going to be taught in the syllabus. Then you are going to capture evidence from those students that they have actually learned what you intended to teach them. This is actually totally essential part of any course, because, for instance, if you were training people to be electricians or plumbers, particularly in the case of electricians, if you weren't gathering that evidence which really proved to you that that person had learned what it was you were teaching them, it could have lethal consequences. In the same way, we would expect all our student teachers to demonstrate that they have integrated and understood the teaching that is required, the knowledge and skills to become a yoga teacher, and then demonstrated that through some assignments and through some practical teaching assessments which are observed. But again, that still doesn't make it a standard. So you've taught them something, you've gathered evidence that they've learned it, and then that evidence has to be marked, and it's marked by the tutor. And when that evidence has been marked, a second person comes in called an internal quality assurance assessor, and they check that the tutor is marking the work at the correct level. And as I've said before, in the case of BWY courses, that is foundation degree level. In the case of our accredited groups, it is at a level that meets all the criteria and learning outcomes that we set for our accredited groups. It's still not quite a standard because you need another layer on top of that, which is an external quality assurance procedure. So it would be a little bit cozy just to have the tutor and an internal quality assurance. That's someone from the same training faculty, if you like, coming in and observing them. So you have an external quality assurance layer where they come in, that would be British School of Yoga qualifications on our courses, and they would check that everything is being delivered in accordance with the qualification criteria, that all the qualification learning outcomes are being met. And of course, the external EQA people, BWIQ, are being overseen by Ofqual. And now you have a standard. Now you have something that is a standard, because you can say this person has reached this level, has met all these learning outcomes, has demonstrated their skills, competence and knowledge across a range of outcomes. And that is an educational standard. Whether you go into a school and see GCSEs, you go into a sixth form college and see how A-levels are delivered, you go to any college or university, that is what defines a standard. Now, if you have something very, very loose, which just says the tutors should be competent and they should publish what they're going to teach, what you will get is someone on this course over here is going to be at this standard, but you don't really know what that level is or level of training. Someone on a completely different course will be at a different level. So there's no comparability. You could end up with a 200-hour or a 500-hour qualification, and yet that doesn't have any meaning in terms of the education system, because it's not at a standard, it's not at a level. That's not to say that there aren't merits to that system, but it's just to describe it as a standard is very misleading.